Hey, hey. Welcome to the Fiddlewax live question and answer session. I am Adam. I'm the builder behind Fiddlewax. The strange camera work is trying to compensate for the lighting on the iPad. Sorry if it looks a bit atrocious. We don't quite have a full house yet, but we'll get started anyway. I guess with I'll just start with an overview of the instrument, and then I'll dive into questions as they come in. So I'll set the mirror back up here and get going. Okay, so this is Fiddlewax Pro in its blurry state. There's a button over here. This is the information button. If you tap on that, you get an overview of the instrument. Let me see if I can make the exposure a little better. Ugh. All right, we'll come back. So yes, this is the overview of the instrument. We'll come back out. So essentially it's broken up into 4 sections. Across the top, you have parameters. Over here you have drum loops, drum samples. To the right of that, you have loops. That's what I was playing when we started. So you hit play, they start up. You can stop them easily. Master volume control over here. And then down below, you have the keys section. And so this is all of your notes. So you have essentially the piano here, a row of notes that make up the scale, and then finally a row that is only the notes in the chord you've selected here. So that's an A minor, C major, D minor, A minor. So you get the idea there. And then you can build things up pretty quickly. So for example, I had put this in before. So I'll clear up some loops now. Kind of get a fresh sense of how this works. So if I want to layer over that, I just start recording a loop. And you hit record again when you're done recording the loop, and there they are, they're laid over each other. And yeah, you can keep adding. So if I say take the string part, I can add actually on top of that. If I don't like that, I just hit the X. No, I won't keep it. Try again. It's a little better. Want to keep it? Click the record button. You can also undo one step at a time. So if you've selected that you're okay with it and you want to undo, just press and hold. And then it comes back off, and I can redo. Bring it back in. Okay, but really this is a question and answer session. So yeah, let me start off. How do you control the dynamics or volume of the sounds in the instrument? So if you look at it, it's pretty flat looking. That's intentional so that nothing's getting in your way as you're trying to create. But each of these keys actually has variable volume depending on where you hit it. So if you hit in the middle of a drum sound, that'll be its loudest. And if I go to the corner, you can hear it gets a lot softer. So essentially, for each of the keys, so the drums, but also the chords, that'd be louder, a little bit softer. Same with the notes down at the bottom. Louder and then softer. And the difference is meant to be subtle enough that it's not going to distract from music if you miss a little bit, but you can purposely control it. And with that, you can do really kind of expressive, interesting things, even as you're in the middle of playing a part. So especially with the drum kit, if you use the standard kit, which gives you more space, fewer sounds, but more space. Now you can get 2 fingers to play the kit, and there you'll want to be hitting near the center if you want it loud, or near the edges if you want it soft, but you can clearly be going back and forth where yeah, so, and that's with all of these. So the drum kit is 2-dimensionally sensitive, so it's the center relative to everything there. But the notes down at the bottom are actually only sensitive in the vertical dimension, and that is so that you can slide left and right across the keys, and you won't hear all the attenuation from hitting the edges of notes. So you can slide across the center, and it's going to be kind of loud. If you slide kind of near the edges of the rows, it's going to be a lot softer. So you can use that to your advantage in all the songs you create to kind of add dynamics, add changes in volume as you play. Let's see, the next question that I have here is kind of what's with all of the, what do the colors mean in the keyboard? So you can see it's different levels of blue and gray, and again, it's a very flat interface, and that's intentional. So the darkest colors, so like the M there for the relative, or the major or minor, based on the chord above, or the flat and sharp of each. Those are all dark because they are out of key. You'll also see in the scale down here that there are blue notes. Let me pick a different instrument so you can hear a little better. So like the piano, those dark notes are the blue notes, not the color blue, musically blue, in that they are out of key but give the music feeling. So you'll notice if you listen to some kind of old blues records that you're going to hear a lot of that. And that's that blue note coming through. And depending on what scale you pick, some of the scales, so the blues scale has 1 blue note. The augmented scale has a few, and it depends on what key you're in to how many of those notes show up. But the point here is that the darkest color, I'll go back to the blues, the darkest color means it is out of key. It doesn't mean you shouldn't play it, but it means it will probably not sound as consonant, aligned with the other tones in your scale as the others. So going through the colors down here at the bottom, darkest is out of key. The kind of medium gray, those are all notes in the key. So you notice all of the chords here are that light gray color because all of the notes in that chord are in the key. So they have the C, the C6, C7, C9. Those are all directly in the key of A minor. So they're all that light gray. And similarly on the keyboard, any of those keys are all in the key. Yeah, so as we go, if you have questions, definitely leave them down below. There should be a space to put questions. So I'll see those as they come in, and I'm happy to jump around. But otherwise, I've got a few things that I'm happy to go through just to kind of keep the wheels turning and help explain some common questions that have come in. So you've got the dark gray is out of key, light gray is in key, and then you have 3 colors of blue, three shades of blue. So the darkest blue means that it's in the chord, but it's not the root of the chord. So for a C chord, the E and the G are in the C chord, but not the root of the chord. And then the darker, or the lighter blue color is the C, the root of the chord. You'll also notice as you play, you get the final color, which is that bright blue, so that you can quickly see which notes you're holding down and how that affects the other rows. And that'll show up even on like the blue notes that are out of the key. So when you play that blue note, you see that blue note is actually up 3/2 steps from the C. Okay, yeah, write questions if you have them, otherwise I'll keep going. So the relationship between chords. So this is now, we're looking at the chord section, and I wish it wasn't quite so blurry for the viewers, but if you have a still shot of the interface or you're playing along on your iPad, definitely look at it so you can see what I'm talking about. But the chords, the largest chord is the three-note triad that you get when you are in that key. So A minor is just that A, C, E. And then you have the suspended 2 and suspended 4 chords. Like I said, the 6, 7, and 9 chords. And so those are all just different intervals within the key. But you also have the darker chords, and these are special, as well as the -5 and the +5. So the -5 is down by a fifth in the circle of fifths. So this is great for modulating or changing the key that you're in. So we're in the key of A minor here. And let's modulate. I'll go down to the -5 on each of those. Oops. So you can see how that moves around. You also have the flat and the sharp, and that's for moving a half step. So if you want to move chromatically from A minor down a half step or A minor up a half step, you can just use the chromatic notes below. I see some viewers kind of coming and going, so definitely if you have comments, leave them. There should be a space down below, down here, and they'll show up and I can start to answer them. I would much prefer to be answering your questions live in real time, so feel free, type it in, and I'll get to it as soon as I can. So let's look at the chorded zither. So this, I think, is one of the most interesting parts of Fiddlewax Pro. Here, if you play a chord, say A minor, all of the notes from that chord occur in that final row. And this leads to some very complex harmonies. Harmonies are kind of melodies that jump around, arpeggios, really simply. So you can A minor, jump up maybe to the C, maybe to the E minor, and back down to the A minor. So again, sorry it's so blurry, but you can get a sense for how this works. So that's the chorded zither, or an auto harp is the other term that's been used for quite a while and is now kind of in the public domain. But in addition to being able to play those main chords, you can also play all the others. So say in C6, or the C9. And of course, you can mix the two. So you say you have the C9 down below, and then you have the blues scale above that. So in the middle of making something, so let's record a loop real quick here. So and you could then come in with another part, so a guitar part, and play in the pentatonic, or in the blues actually. Not the best recording, but you get the idea. So you can kind of start mixing those rows together depending on what you want to do. And of course, don't forget, because of this piano layout, you have both the diatonic and the chromatic side by side So you can quickly lay down diatonic or chromatic riffs in addition to the notes in the scale or the notes that are purely in the chord, in this case, the C9. So let's move on to tempo and time signature. So let me just put down a little rhythm real quick. Okay, now you'll notice if we come up here to the top, so this is at 123 beats per minute. Oh, that resolution is horrible. I'm sorry. You can change the tempo by just sliding back and forth. You can also tap tempo, although it's going to jump around, which might sound weird here. There you go, you get an idea for that. The other thing to note is that the time signature has an effect on the duration of the loops you've recorded. So essentially you're saying time signature, right? You've got the numerator and the denominator, the top and the bottom of the time signature. So this is what gets a beat and how many beats are in a measure. So 4/4 says that there are 4 beats in a measure and a quarter note gets a beat. But now if I say 4/8, there are 4 beats in a measure, but an eighth note gets a beat, which means it's essentially twice as fast because I recorded quarter notes over here, and now an eighth note gets a beat. And so you can come back and you can play with that as you're going to kind of double or half the speed that kind of to jump tempo by a factor of 2 with the time signature. There are also real-time effects, and these are there to let you kind of experiment with different sounds that you get. So for example, playing the guitar sound leads to kind of one type of playing, but as soon as you put kind of heavy reverb on that, you immediately are thinking of different melodic lines to play. So that's the reverb. We also have the filter over here. So now you're just hearing the high part, really tinny, really muffled, kind of the low part in the middle. Kind of gives you a garage feel. Yeah, so let's move on. Next question about loop sizing. Okay, so there are 5 channels. Essentially, you have 5 loopers that you can use in parallel. You can use them completely separately if you're purposely turning them on and off relative to one another, or you can layer them on top of each other to build out more complex parts. So if we record one loop, so that's 4 beats. If I record another loop, it will be a multiple of whatever loop is playing. So if this is playing, and I record a new loop, essentially went 2 times through, so that's now 8 beats, whereas the first is 4 beats. And if you wanted to record something shorter, say you recorded 64 beats, and you then wanted to go back. So here, let's record something a little longer. Try that again with something a little nicer. There we go. So now we have something that's 32 beats long. Now, if you wanted to record something that was shorter at this point, all you have to do is stop the other loops and record something new. So now that's only 8 beats. Even though there was something recorded that was 32 beats, this is only 8 because the others were not playing. So essentially this is working with you. If you're building a song and you're leaving loops playing as you build it, it's going to auto expand to keep everything in sync. If you want to purposely separate how your loops are working, you can do that by shutting others off as you record new loops. So let's take a short break here and just try to record a little jam, give you a feel for how that process might actually go. So I like to start maybe with some drums. Kind of drums and bass are often good foundations, but it's clearly up to you what you choose to start with. Get a little hi-hat in there, or a little. You see I've got quantization on a little bit, so that's why everything is locking in. Let's get a bass line. So to get to the bass notes, I'm going to do the keyboard zoom and come to the lowest section. All right, so you can get a bass line. Maybe bring in some higher instrumentation, a little bit of higher voicing in it, so come up a bit. Right, yeah. Here's the basic groove. So you've got a basic groove going, and now let's say you want to come in and put in a really fast short part like we were talking before. You could record that separately. Maybe you want to mix up the drum kit. So instead of putting 2 acoustic layers together, we could put 1 acoustic and 1 electronic. So now we'll get a little quick 4-beat. It'll work great. Pretty simple. So that's the gist of looping. Next, I want to take a turn and go into a more advanced form of looping, which I really like to do, but it's hard, so I'm not very good at it. So let's try this. So this gives you full control over the timing of your loop. So I'm going to clear out the loop completely, clear out the looper, so all of the channels have no audio data, no MIDI data. And I'll start recording, but I'll turn the metronome off. By turning the metronome off when you record, you're signaling that you want to record a loop that starts at the first key press and ends when you hit the record button. but it can be variable timing. So it's not locked into any particular tempo. It's whatever tempo you choose, and you just have to be very accurate about coming back over and hitting that button. So I'll try this. So pretty close, but you can hear that slight hiccup where I didn't quite get it aligned. But this lets you really be freeform about it. You don't have to think about locking into a tempo, hearing a click track that interrupts what you're trying to do. You can just lay down a track and layer over it. So you notice a couple things happened when I did that. First of all, now that I have an analog loop track, the metronome is completely disabled because that doesn't make sense in this world now. And the quantize is also disabled because it doesn't make sense in this analog looping world. The text in green is to let you know that those parameters are slightly different than normal. So this would normally be beats down here. It says 1.0. Now it just means that it's one fraction of an entire analog loop. So it's not actually in beats, it's in loop length. And up here, the tempo is now at 100%. And you'll notice as you slide that, you can go up to 200% and down to 50%, but it's not in beats per minute here. This is relative as a percentage. So let's keep building up an analog loop and see where that leads us. All the same rules apply. Let's start another bass line. Let's put a really crunchy guitar in it, and otherwise kind of shakes it up. So you get the idea, and that's analog looping, where you have a variable length loop that's not tied into beats per minute. You can kind of rush with it and move with it however you want, especially for longer sections where you might have throughout an entire phrase the tempo might move a little bit, but it returns to where it started. So the loop won't be that noticeable. Like you won't hear the loop point noticeably, but you will feel additional kind of movement in that, as opposed to being locked in rigidly to some kind of click track or beat. So we'll race those back out if you want. So you can see the metronome then comes back on because it's clear and it doesn't. All of the looping is cleared out and it doesn't know what I want to do next. You can set the default. So right now the default is that it assumes you want the click track, but if you don't want that, you go to the info page. Oh, this lighting is horrible. I'm sorry. But on the info page over here, there's a button that says New Loops Start As, and it's currently at beat synced. But if you tap on that, now it's analog. And so that means by default, when you start a loop, so now if I start a loop, metronome doesn't come on. But I could flip that. So metronome doesn't come on. I could. There you go. Analog loop. But similarly, if you force the click track on, then you're back into the beat mode, the beat synced mode. So if I put it on, so now we're back into a beat synced loop. So that's pretty straightforward. The idea is that the default action is simple, but if you want, you can turn on the advanced option to make your loops a little more interesting, a little more expressive. So let's take a look at real-time MIDI output. So there are two layers of MIDI happening in the interface in Fiddlewax Pro. The first is real-time MIDI output, and that's located up at the top where it says audio. You can tap on that, and you can swap it over to audio plus MIDI or just MIDI. So audio plus MIDI does just that, so you can still hear all the notes, but it's also outputting MIDI. So any app that's listening for MIDI, which could be on your desktop, this need help with MIDI button here will show you how to set it up over Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, which is pretty cool. But you can also take that MIDI and send it to other apps locally. So if you want to play MIDI from GarageBand or whatever, you can use this as your interface, your tonal interface or your drum pad into another synthesizer to make the sounds, to produce the sounds. There's MIDI output only, which if you're doing that is what you probably want to do, because you don't want, in that case, you don't want the sounds of Fiddlewax Pro. You're trying to make the sounds appear somewhere else. So when you just flip it on MIDI only, it's not going to render the sounds here. It's only going to render them in your synthesizer. But if you don't have one connected, as is the case for me now, you won't hear any sound. So I'll put back to audio. Well, you know what? Let's try. I'll load up GarageBand. So I'll flip on MIDI. I've got MIDI output. And you can hear nothing plays because it's sending MIDI notes. Now what I'll do is I'll come over here and open GarageBand. And I will create a new track. Once it loads here, it will create a new MIDI track in GarageBand so it knows to listen for MIDI events. So I say keyboard. Okay. There you go. So this is GarageBand's piano. But now if I come back out to Fiddlewax, I'm still in MIDI mode. Fiddlewax is not playing those notes. You're using the interface to send information to tell GarageBand to actually play the notes. So if you like the piano sample, for example, better in GarageBand, you can do that. So you still get all the interface from Fiddlewax Pro, but you can get the sounds from somewhere else. So I'm going, if you turn them both on, you get a bit of a mess. In this case, not too bad, but essentially they're both rendering sound, and you're getting they're competing for one another for the speaker, and it, especially with certain instruments, it gets pretty weird. So if I have an accordion, I've got a piano and an accordion playing together. It's kind of cool, but I'll leave that up to you if that's your intended direction. We'll zoom back out on the keyboard. Let me flip MIDI off. In this case, I'll just swipe away GarageBand. Now I just have the instrument back in Fiddlewax Pro. Okay, and let's look at the other MIDI. So one of the MIDIs is real-time. The other MIDI is session MIDI. So if you record something, got piano, and now let's have a second bit. So we've got a little bit of strings and a little bit of piano. I can see I just recorded that. It's 13 seconds long. If I go to share it, tap on email, you'll see that it actually puts two attachments on the email. There we go. There's an M4A file, that's the audio, and there's an MID file. Sorry, this is totally washed out. And that is the MIDI file that you just recorded from the session. So if you want to use a MIDI file and import it into a digital audio workstation or whatever workflow you have, you can record it as a session audio up top and then export that to whatever program. So if you're just joining, note down below there should be a place to write questions. Leave a question and I will address it in the video directly. So barring that, I'll continue on. So the other aspect I wanted to cover is how you connect to Audiobus. This is pretty straightforward. If you are familiar with Audiobus, you don't actually need to do anything in Fiddlewax Pro to turn it on. It's on by default. You just come back out and load Audiobus. There we go. And you can then add as an input Fiddlewax Pro. And I'll launch that. And there you go. So you can see the data is flowing from Fiddlewax Pro to whatever output you have. So there's how you would connect into Audiobus. And if we head back over to Fiddlewax Pro, you now see there's a little Audiobus guide. I'm going to try to get the picture a little better. It's looking really bad. I can turn the exposure way down, but just makes it too dark. Oi. Oh. Well, thanks for bearing with me as I try to tell this to behave itself. So yes, so now Audiobus is connected. There's a little tab over the side that's hard to see, but you can swap back over to Audiobus and add on different effects connected to different outputs as you would any other Audiobus capable app. To unload it, just hit the little eject button, and now when you come back over, you'll see the Audiobus has disappeared. So yeah, that's how you get Audiobus to connect and disconnect. If you want to share a file with another app, so we come back up to the file list here. This is so washed out. It's almost not worth the time. So I'll go back to the file that was created from before. I can hit iOS apps, and let me see if I can do anything. So it's hard to see there, but it's actually showing different apps that you could output that file to. So there's an organ that will apparently accept it, as well as Dropbox and Evernote and Google Drive. They all take the sound output file, and you can export that to upload it or whatever you want to do there. There was also a button to upload to SoundCloud if you want to directly take what you've written in Fiddlewax Pro and share it online. So let's put together another little beat. Since you can't really see much, maybe hearing is a little bit easier. Get the metronome going. Maybe the organ part. A little harsh, maybe a little piano on it. That piano feels a little nicer. The organ was harsh. Let's scrap the organ part. Maybe come back with some strings. Loop comes around. Here we go. So you get so we'll go through those again. So you've got a drum track, some strings, and then the piano part, and you can easily flip those on and off as you want. If you want to get them to cycle through, just so that's how you can easily build up a loop and layer things on top of each other. Once those are playing, let's explore some of the other scales. So you've got the blues scale. The piano is kind of easiest to hear these. So these scales are ordered essentially from the most consonant, the most kind of simple and pleasing, but not very colorful scales, all the way up to the most dissonant but kind of moody scales. So the tetratonic, this is just a 4-note scale. Where essentially everything is consonant. It's very strong in the key. It doesn't leave much room for imagination, but it is a great way to ground the key you're in. So if you want to help the listener really lock into the key, something in the tetratonic, it's going to really lock it in. The pentatonic, this is a really common scale for blues, rock, pop, alternative. Most kinds of modern Western music have a pentatonic in there somewhere that they're kind of built on top of. So you get that same consonance, that same harmonic, nice feel from the tetratonic, but you add an additional note that gives it a little bit more color. And if you listen to some tracks by your favorite bands, you'll probably, if you start picking them apart, you'll find there are a lot of pentatonics in there, way more than you would imagine. And often what makes the music really good is those moments where they break out of the pentatonic just a little bit to give it additional color. And that's where things like the blues scale come in. So the blues scale can be thought of as kind of the pentatonic with a blue note or a out of note, or not, excuse me, an out of key note thrown in. So we've got we're in the key of C or A minor, and then there's this blue note in there that feels out of place, but played in relation to the notes in the pentatonic, that blue note leans. It's I think it's an appoggiatura. Is that? I'm not quite sure. It's one of those. Essentially, you get these nice melodic lines where you start on it and come out of it, and so you feel the kind of tension and release that makes a song kind of move forward, or gives it really kind of a deeper, richer feel. Going beyond the blues, you can look at the augmented, and now we start getting, there are 2 blue notes or 2 out of key notes. And it starts to feel a little more mysterious, and it's now very ambiguous which key you're in. So these scales become a lot harder to use, but if played at the right time, can really make a piece of music come to life. So you'll notice like a whole tone scale. This has, in this case, 3 blue notes. But if you listen to a lot of kind of classical, modern jazz, if you can say that, there is a lot of that kind of Thelonious Monk whole note scale thrown in somewhere in the piece. So you might feel kind of grounded, You kind of come out of that for a minute, and the whole tone scale gives you a very different feel. So these are all there to play with. The tritone is kind of the darkest of the scales. And these are harder to work with, but these will get, like if you're building a soundtrack, say, that goes behind a video and you want it to be darker or a little mysterious, these scales with more notes out of the key will give you that a lot more than, if you have a tense scene and you come in with a tetratonic, there's almost no tension there to be found. So it's like anything poetic. You need both tension, you need both dissonance and consonance to build to kind of build the ups and downs through a piece. So those are the scales. And then let's see, we've got one more on the list. I thought I'd just take a brief moment and kind of describe the big idea behind this instrument. To be fully transparent to people that might watch this video later, there's only one person viewing right now, so thank you very much, whoever you are. It is very much appreciated. And while I have your ear, I will describe to you what I think the big idea behind this instrument is. To me, looking at musical instruments, especially those kind of trapped in a 2D surface, they all kind of fall into these 4 different categories, and none of them really suited what I was looking for. So they either felt like a toy, which was fun for a few minutes, and you quickly kind of musically hit a wall, or they were a niche kind of instrument, something that makes really interesting synthesized sound, but you're stuck kind of in that domain. You can't easily move that into a kind of a songwriting direction. Or third, kind of a utility, things like Audiobus, really well designed, really useful, but in and of themselves don't give you much musically. And then you have these kind of studio apps, things like GarageBand, that try to give you the full like desktop music environment, production environment on a tablet. And I think that's very ambitious and cool, but they get so fussy, so finicky, where you're just managing all kinds of little parts of a track, and you're not really thinking about musically what you want to build. So with Fiddlewax Pro, the idea was to really build something that helps people create music from that very early idea where it's not even sound yet, and you're still figuring out what it is, up to the point that you can feel like it's shaped 80% of the way musically to what you want it to be. And then, of course, at that point, once you have the music that that expresses, at least in essence, what you were trying to do, you can go to those niche apps. You can use the really powerful utilities to pipe it around. You can pull the MIDI out and put it in a digital audio workstation. You can spend weeks on a single song, kind of mulling it over. But most songs happen in that very short period of time, and even a few minutes to a few hours, where there's kind of a creative burst in your building, and this app is trying to let creators do that. So okay, I'll get off my soapbox. That's what I hope this does. And the fact that there's just one viewer here maybe says I missed the mark slightly, but I hope that maybe it's just a word that needs to be spread. And I have to say, using it myself, I'm clearly too close to it to know objectively, but using it myself, I've created more songs in the last week than, I don't know, maybe I have in my life. It's prior to that, probably created, I don't know, 30 or 40 songs, kind of start to finish in a week as I've been playing with it, which is pretty cool. So not to say that those songs are great, but there's probably 5 or 10 of them that I think have really interesting musical ideas. And without a tool like this, I wouldn't have even started to write them down. It would have just been little, I don't know, experiments in the shower singing. So yeah, so that's the idea. I thought I would round this this Q&A out with just some tips for how to get the most out of this instrument. So I've played this in its various states for about 6 months now, and I've found there are a handful of things that really make it more powerful if you know to look for them. Because there's been a lot of walls that I've hit as I've been creating, and as I've discovered little pieces, I've written them down, and I thought, this is a good time to share them with people that are interested. So first thing is, like any musical instrument, this really behaves like a musical instrument. Unlike kind of a pattern sequencer, which is a lot more cerebral, you're just kind of thinking it through, listening, hearing the same loop over and over and over. Here, you need to play it like an instrument. You need to get your fingers to move quickly to the spaces you want them to move to express yourself through it. So just like you're learning a piano or guitar or drums or whatever, it does take a little practice. But that practice is rewarded with being able to really play an instrument. So everything is meant to be pretty simple to get started. You don't have to know much, but you'll find that getting your fingers to move quickly changes how this instrument feels to you, what you can really do with it. So I would say try, you can set the metronome, come to a tempo you're comfortable with. So I don't know, say 150 for me right now. And try to just try to match that tempo as precisely as you can. And you can go double time. You can work with particular patterns. It makes a big difference. Just practicing for 5 or 10 minutes before you jump into really trying to use the instrument to create you'll be surprised how much muscle memory builds up, and you start actually finding little patterns by accident where you slide across a few things. Let me get back maybe to the full kit, where you can just, the pads here allow you to slide. So unlike kind of a more mechanical pad that would be harder to slide across, here you can not only find the patterns within it with fast fingers, but you're also finding kind of shapes. You're finding lines through the instrument that you think sound good. So yeah, the first thing, practice, which sounds a little pedantic, but it's an instrument. Treat this as an instrument, not as kind of a one-off sequencer looper app. The more you practice, the more you'll be able to do with it. The next is kind of a little hack that I found, and that is a finger roll. So when you're really trying to time your finger precisely, these keys are small, and they're intentionally small, so you have a 4-octave keyboard at the bottom by default, which is pretty cool, but it takes a lot of practice to actually get there. The finger roll lets you actually move between those keys very quickly, faster than trying to push so the finger roll allows you to move faster than trying to translate your finger. So instead of, clearly if you're doing a slide, let your finger move. But if you're going just between 2 notes, I recommend rolling your finger. So it's a little hard to see here, but so instead of sliding my finger, I'm rolling, and that's much easier to do quickly than trying to translate your finger. And I found that makes a big difference. Going back to the timing, that gave me a lot more precise timing for little parts where I'm trying to align in a note, especially with kind of analog loops, which are harder to align. Yeah, so finger roll. That's a silly little thing, but it makes a difference. The third part is consider the quantization. Yeah, this tip is pretty basic, but it's easy to forget what your quantization is doing. And if you're quantizing heavily, say 2 times per beat or 4 times per beat, and you record something that has a big slide in it, it's going to turn into, it's going to jump, it's going to quantize that slide into something else. And so when you then go to undo that quantization, later you'll find that your other parts are not out of sync. So keep in mind quantization as you play. I recommend kind of deciding on a quantization for a song and rolling with it. So if you can play raw, that's the most advanced version where you need to really line everything up yourself. You'll get the most out of it. But I don't recommend starting heavily quantized and then backing out to raw. Your piece will start to fall apart. Going the other way is not so bad, but going from quantized to not quantized is usually kind of bad news. Next, I'd say think in parallel. So this instrument is built so that nothing gets in your way as you. He sounds so lofty, but that's really the design principle here. So no part of the interface is covering up another part of the interface. When you go to change a parameter, that's not sliding in the way of your drum kit or your notes, and you can use that to your advantage. So while you're playing this, right, so you can start to mix chords and notes and patterns and loops in parallel. So try to get beyond thinking of these sections all as separate, kind of one in series with the next, and think of them in parallel. Effects. The effects are very basic, intentionally so. There's just reverb and filter, which you can't quite read, but if you have the app, and the reason why it's so sparse, the point of this app is not to give you 40 effects to monkey with and kind of get lost in effects. The idea of these effects are to change the nature of the sounds that you're hearing such that it loops back and changes what you play. So I often find that with some kind of reverb, I will record entirely different melodic lines than without reverb. So if you listen to something like Explosions in the Sky, where you have very heavy reverb and high guitar parts, if you play those without reverb, they fall apart. So reverb extends all of your notes in a way that is hard to mimic without it. And so it made sense to put it in. And filtering is another one where if you hear just kind of the low end or just high end, it changes what instruments you play. So you might find that the organ sounds really heavy with one filtering combination, and you slide the filter, and now the organ falls below, and the drum kit comes up, and you record different parts. So it's really a songwriting tool, and those effects are there to help you play with that. And then just two more tips that I have to really get the most out of the instrument, and that is to constrain yourself. This is more a tip for writing music. If you're a professional musician and you're comfortable with this, ignore this, you know what you're doing. But if you're getting started, you're an amateur songwriter, and you're trying to really make music on a tablet, understand that a lot of really, really good music starts from an incredibly simple foundation. So it's easy. There are 12 instruments here. I really wanted just to have 3 or 4 for the reason that it's easy to keep layering in more and more instruments and think that's how you make better music. Where a lot of songs will have 2 or 3 parts that really define what that song is about. So constrain yourself and work within those constraints to build something, as opposed to throwing every instrument you can at the problem. And then the final tip I can give to get the most out of Fiddlewax Pro is to don't overthink the songs as you're playing them. This is more of a tip for anyone getting started with a new instrument. Treat this as a musical instrument. This is not meant to be a toy or a really cerebral sequencer. This is really meant to be played as an instrument. So the way you're going to find new patterns, new sounds, is to let your fingers kind of wander and figure out what sounds good to you, and play with it in both the sense of playing an instrument, but also as a game, you know, like, and let your. I get tired of hearing myself talk. It's because it's not about overthinking it. It's about playing notes, and you're like, oh, that's an interesting chord. I didn't know what that is. That was a C. That was a C, and then I played the 2 notes around, which actually I guess would be the 9, right? So I played a version of a C9 kind of accidentally, and I liked it, so I could go back and think about what that means. But play with it and don't overthink it. That's how you really will get the most out of any musical instrument, I think, and really learn intuitively what sounds go together. So that's really it. It's been an hour, and I thank the viewers who tuned in. I didn't see any questions come through, which is a real bummer. Partly, I'm sure, because the video quality is so horrible. Here, let me close. I'll close more personally, since that makes more sense. I can flip all this back. There we go. Okay. So yes, thank you, dear viewer, for being interested enough to leave this on, even if it's been in the background. I hope you are someone who has enjoyed playing Fiddlewax Pro as an instrument, and let me know what you think. Spending an hour hearing me yammer on about this is very nice of you. So yeah, I'm here to help. I'm the developer behind the app, but I really am building it because I love this kind of stuff, and I want to help other people make music too. So yeah, let me know. Leave me a comment. I'm on the Audiobus forum quite a bit, so leave comments there. I'll try to get to them as fast as I can. Or you can send an email directly to me via hello@fiddlewax.com. All right, I think that wraps it up. Thanks a lot. Cheers.